Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, bots and cons to Tech Talk, the officially unofficial Transformers TCG podcast. I'm joined as always by Scott of VectorSigma.info, and we're back, Scott, and it's that time of year again. Well, I guess 3 times a year where we're starting to get more than a tiny trickle of spoilers.
Yeah, it's a little slower this time. We haven't had the big article reveal yet, so still waiting on that one.
Would you consider the Trypticon reveal to be that? Do you think they're going to do another one?
Yeah. I mean, like, even for some of the in the middle of season spoilers, there were some like IGN type things that had like 5 or 6 spoilers. It was in the middle of everything else, so like it kind of just gets lost. But like,
right,
it wasn't always just a huge Kotaku kickoff, but like, I don't consider the Trypticon thing to be part of this because
it's more tied to Gen Con.
Yeah, it's just not, like, to me, I know it's like not even numbered as part of the set.
That's fair.
So, like, to me, it's something that's like extra and like not really, like, the theme of the set is not Trypticon, whereas like the theme of the set continues to be like, the cards that we've seen, and they're more on, quote, on brand, I guess you would say.
Makes sense. Yeah, so, I follow. I'm picking up what you're putting down. I'm very curious because I was thinking about it today on my drive home from work, and we're just under, at least at the time of this recording, by the time it goes live, it'll obviously be different, but we're just under 50 days until the official release, I think, or somewhere around there. So because it's early November, we're partway into September already. By the time this goes live, we'll be roughly halfway. We're getting close, so I expect that the velocity of the spoilers is going to increase naturally.
Yeah, I can say at the time of this recording, we've not received any yet, but I have it on pretty good authority that they'll be coming out soon. So I would imagine that other content creators / influencers out there through various channels, because there's different ways that people,
of course,
talk to people, will be getting theirs within the next few weeks as well. Absolutely,
yeah. And we actually, which we'll get to a little bit later, but we did already get a single spoiler from one of those, I guess, third-party outlets kind of thing, content creators, as opposed to directly from Wizards. So it's already getting underway, and there's some pretty interesting things in this. But again, we'll get into that a little bit later. The first thing we wanted to talk about was actually some recent events, because the qualifier season is still live by the time that this podcast goes live. And you don't have a whole lot of time left if you are planning on qualifying before those last chance qualifiers, which at this stage, we know they exist. But Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, there hasn't been any details other than, yes, they are a thing, correct?
Correct. Publicly, yes. Correct.
Right. Yeah, I don't, we know they're going to be at PAX. I mean, if any of you out there listening, you probably are familiar with the entire concept. If you played other games, it's last chance qualifier. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's your last chance to try and squeeze in literally the night before sort of thing. That's what I'm expecting going in. And yes, there are certainly instances in other games where people have done that and then gone the distance the entire way, but you're putting a lot more pressure on yourself if you're going to try and tackle it via that route rather than qualifying in the remaining store qualifiers.
Yeah, it's going to be the type of thing where like the metagame of the last chance qualifiers will be I don't want to say it'll be the same as the Invitational, but it's the same pool of cards.
Right.
So I guess it's just, I would imagine if you were not qualified for whatever reason, you're not going to like hold back and not play your best thing to try to get in the
absolutely
Invitational. So yeah. But on the flip side, a lot of the players you would think won't maybe playing them for fun, but I would imagine like, we can talk about this as we get closer, but like if I was to play one on Friday or whatever day the last chance qualifiers are, like there's a high percentage chance I wouldn't be playing my quote real decks.
Right.
That I'd be playing the next day. So
yeah, that definitely makes sense, because if you don't have that, the last chance on the line, why are you going to give away all your secrets early?
Right. For some prize tickets.
Exactly. I mean, yes, there's something on the line, but the the focal point of the weekend is not going to be, if you're already qualified, the initial event there. It's something that I know I'm going to plan on playing in, assuming that the timing works out or there's not, some other restriction that prevents me from doing so. But I'm in the same boat as you. I'll probably play something, relatively competitive, but probably for funsies. Yeah. Maybe just explore some of the new cards or whatever.
Yeah, if I was to do it, that's what I would do.
So, but speaking about this format, to bring it back, so you played an event a couple weeks ago now. Mine was this past weekend, but obviously date and times change, obviously, depending on when you are listening to this or watching this on YouTube. And let's start with your event, Scott. So it actually, up to this point, is the largest Energon Invitational Qualifier to date outside of Gen Con, correct?
Yeah, unsurprisingly.
Right. We've mentioned it many times before, we are very fortunate that it's a very clustered area and that there's a lot of people within driving distance, reasonable travel distance, that came out. And I think it was 31. Is that the right number?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty sizable amount and a pretty good turnout, I'll say. So I do have the rotating deck list, and I apologize to anybody out there who's trying to follow. You can always head over to vectorsigma.info for the, if you just want the static ones. It's rotating on its own between the event I was at and the one that Scott was at. Tell us a little bit about the field, Scott, because while the top 8 is obviously important, what actually took down the event is important, and what placed and where it placed and all that stuff. Sometimes you can glean information, as we've mentioned in the past, from the field. Is it the sea of orange that seemingly everybody thinks it is?
It wasn't at this qualifier because I believe that a large density of the players were already qualified. So that might be part of it. I mean, if I'm going to make a value judgment as to how, well-positioned certain decks are, I would say that might be part of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I faced, I think, 3 orange decks. Well, 2 strictly orange decks, 1 mostly orange deck, and then 2 mostly blue decks on the day, personally. But throughout the rest of the field that I could tell, I would still say it was pretty... I mean, it was orange slanted, but I would still say it was pretty well balanced considering the vast imbalance I've seen in other places. I would say it was more balanced. Right. But again, I think a large part of that is because some of us were playing things we wanted to try, and other players were playing things they wanted to try to combat some of the meta and try things out because they were already qualified and things like that. They weren't just... a lot of people weren't even running the same decks they qualified with. Some did. So it was pretty varied, I would say. Like, more... I was not expecting to play like as much blue as I did. And there were other ones out there. So, I mean, I think the top 8 was still pretty orange slanted.
Right.
I think what it was like 3 blue decks, 3 mostly blue decks, and then 5 mostly orange decks.
Right. I mean, I don't want to say we're never going to get the even 4-4 split, but I think 5-3 is, that's relatively even.
Yeah, and I would say that was probably representative of the field.
Makes sense. Now, the specific matches are up. I know Stefan, so shout out to him for recording some of those. I know that the conditions were a little cramped. I was actually watching your game earlier, Scott, as I was working on other stuff.
Like the beating I took?
Yeah, well, you had mentioned that offline, and I'm like, was it really? Or was he just saying that? And yeah, it's kind of what you said.
Yeah, I had virtually no chance of winning that match.
To be honest, I did skip through some of it because it was like 90,000 turns of I'll do one for some of it until the Pierce engine started to get there, among other things.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's hard to make your opponent have no cards in their hand when they have a guy that keeps getting back and upgrade every single turn. So, and relevant ones as well.
Right. That kind of, it's not just handheld blasters or other nonsense. It's relevant upgrades.
Right.
So let's talk about takeaways from that event, because anybody out there who's listened to us, and if you're out there doing your homework, like you were saying, Scott, the reports coming in from other events is that it is a lot of orange. And it sounds like a lot of people at the event were, as you said, trying to experiment either to answer the meta, just try a new deck, do something different because they had that buffer of already being qualified. Do you think that there's a problem? Do you think that it's just everybody it's the collective unconscious saying orange decks are the best, so everybody defaults to playing orange decks? Or is there a blue deck out there that hasn't been discovered yet? Or what are your thoughts after playing a blue deck in one of those fields?
I mean, I thought the deck was decent. I think there were mistakes with the deck list, but I thought overall the deck I played was pretty strong. I mean, Brian made the finals with a blue deck.
Right.
And I mean, I think the issue remains. I think the issue is that the real strength is the 3 wide orange decks.
Yes.
And depending on how they're built, even though I managed to take some games against them in matches I didn't think I would have a chance of winning, especially from a sphere methodology, but especially from just like the makeups of the deck, like that I didn't think I would win. I mean, I guess this is where the play skill kind of thing still comes into play, but
of course,
you know, I think it's the strength of those that are keeping down some of the blue decks, because it just becomes difficult to.
It's tough to answer two different problems: the 3 wide,
right,
and the wider things like the blasters, the bug decks.
Right, exactly. So, like, you know, I'm always going to be a fan of the range package, for example, but when they have 14 health and 1 or 2 defense, or or Dino, when they have Dinobot type stats instead of Insecticon type stats, like that's where the armed hovercraft isn't, quote, as good.
Right.
When you're not able to swing for enough damage. So then it becomes very dependent on the hand of the blue player, or like exactly what the makeup of the blue deck is. Like,
right.
You know, personally, like a bunch of little plinky pierce effects don't matter when you would be doing that damage anyway.
Exactly.
So like the tall, or I should say the slightly taller orange decks eat a lot of that stuff for breakfast. So
exactly.
You know, the wide blue decks do well against the wide orange decks, but again, you have the situation where the taller orange decks are beating up on each other, and a lot of it just became a lot of those fighting against each other, and then so that can leave an opening again for these wider orange decks to come into play, and that's why, as we'll get to, like, you know, there's been a predominance of, like, especially in our area, like, you know, a lot of blaster decks making top 8, unsurprisingly, and a lot of like, I guess that's pretty much how it's struck out. I mean, if you look at Frenchie's deck, it's a wide orange deck as well.
Yes.
So, you know, that's why a lot of it. That's what a lot of it is. I think has hinged on. I think it starts with those tall orange decks that people are used to playing. These 3 wide decks that are powerful now and become even more powerful with a Battle Master, and then it all kind of rearranges itself from there in the typical manner.
It's interesting to me. I mean, you had mentioned that Frenchie was running a wide deck. I've been playing Blaster a lot. There are other variations of 4+ character orange decks that are running around in a variety of different flavors. But as you said, on paper, the 3 wide or other blue decks beat up on those wide oranges, and it seems to always be, or not always, but in a lot of cases that, as you said, people show up with the 3 wide orange, the 4 wide oranges beat those up, and then end up taking down the event, but nobody ever seems to be running, or maybe, obviously not nobody, but there are very few blue decks running around to combat the wider ones. The wider orange ones. It's just interesting that it doesn't seem to shape out that way. Maybe it's just a matter of, hey, they got paired against in the early rounds, all of those tall orange decks, and it just didn't go well. It's just interesting to watch those sort of patterns play out, because it does seem to be consistent that, okay, at this stage, we're nearing the end of the qualifier season. This is your meta. Make a judgment call as to what's going to show up at your next qualifier, and then choose accordingly.
Yeah, it's almost like the theory is playing itself out in real time.
Well, that's exactly where I'm going with it. It's just interesting that it's you're watching it, and you had written up those articles, and you had created the diagrams, and we talked about it last week, the week before, and it's just that's exactly what's happening, and the way all the cards are playing out. No pun intended, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I still think there's definitely still room for improvements and on variations of what we see. I mean,
for sure, absolutely.
I've seen multi-pip, both color decks doing well.
Mm-hmm. That was actually a theme of the event I was playing in, but we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, I mean, I'm it's hard to. I mean, I think your best bet at these events, if you're still trying to qualify and you're really trying to look at it scientifically, is to really look at the entire top 8 and not necessarily what beat what to move on, because there might be reasons why certain decks won and certain decks didn't, and who was qualified and who wasn't could still be a factor. So, like,
it gets complicated. Yeah.
The best bet is to just look at whatever the top cut is that's available and make your assessment from there. Like,
well, even within that context,
as much of the game footage as you can. Also,
that one definitely, I would recommend it. You want to research those things, and people that are writing tournament reports. And if you haven't, and you went to an event, please write one or make a video or something. We all would love to hear about it, but it gives you those context clues to your earlier point about, well, was it just the matchup? Was it a play error? Was it one person was qualified and was kind of only half invested, sort of thing? There are a lot of additional factors. My major thing for me would be just try and figure out what your local area is like. As we started out with, our area is fortunate enough to have a lot of people, so you can't necessarily predict even what a large portion of the tournament may be. But if you're showing up and your local area has in the low teens, you may know everybody and you may know exactly what their tendencies are, and therefore you can make a judgment call of, so-and-so's always runs aggro decks, whereas this other so-and-so always happens to run 2 tall primes since the beginning of the game, or, something like that. It's definitely going to be, I think, very complicated for anybody who's still looking to qualify at this stage in the season, just because of all the factors that you were talking about, compounding with, well, what do I even play? Because people have figured out, as you were describing, whether it happens to be sphere-based matchups or just certain interactions. We're now in the part of the meta that I enjoy the most, where it's, okay, we've identified the strengths. We've identified the different things. Now, how can we attack those known quantities or tweak existing ones so that way you're gaining an advantage because of that one oddball green card you included that your opponent didn't expect, or, a different play set of something that can drastically change a matchup. Yeah,
and I also think that, like, there isn't a lot of people aren't taking an opportunity to, like, tune a deck in the environment either. Like, this is like, I already know I don't plan to run Shockwave again at the next event, for example. So, like, I might run it in playtesting or something like that, or to help people out or something like that. But, like, I don't plan to run this deck again. So, like, the changes I would make to this are all theoretical.
Okay.
And would only be tested in a not live fire environment. So, like, I think there's a lot of that going on as well, where, like, we're not getting, the like, unbeatable deck tuned to the hills.
To the razor's edge of
arguing over about, like, how many energy I'm gonna
run. But who does that? Right. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Like, those kind of conversations are not going on.
Yes. So. Well, as you said, the scope and the focus has changed, especially for us, because we are trying to. I don't want to speak for you, Scott, but I know for me, I'm bouncing between a lot of ideas because I want to explore more of what Siege 1 has to offer, especially looking forward to Siege 2. Not to segue too early, but if you're looking at Siege 2 and you haven't fully explored, or at least mostly, or even tried to explore Siege 1, there are going to be a bunch of gaps in your knowledge trying to assess the cards. And, well, this interaction seems good. Do I have anything to base it on? No, because I never even tried to run that card or that character or whatever prior. At least coming in, that way you can say, oh, well, Shockwave, I know in these sort of scenarios, it had these sort of weaknesses and these sort of strengths. Therefore, I'm looking for this sort of card to show up in Siege 2. Without that sort of context, it's tough to judge the new cards, but that's why it's influencing what we're doing now, forward-looking.
Yeah, I would agree.
Which, again, changes the scope of if people in your local area at your local qualifiers are doing the same thing, that could certainly change what the local meta happens to be at a given event, which, as always, is kind of unpredictable anyway for the most part.
Yeah, agreed. I think one of the other hidden positives about going to qualifiers this large is that there is a little bit of room for mistake. Like, I was listening to another podcast, the Shuffle Boss podcast, and one of the hosts was mentioning, I think it was Jesse that was mentioning, I think they only had like 7 or 9 people, and like his margin of error was like one game, like one loss, he was over. Like,
yep.
he had to go undefeated to qualify. Like, they didn't do a cut for whatever reason.
That's odd, but yeah.
I mean, you would probably only cut to a top 2 anyway. So,
right.
Like, in that situation, so like the margin for error is very small. Whereas here, I think and we had a clean cut. I think at 3-1-1.
Mm-hmm.
So like, and I was 8th, so I was 3-1-1 because I had an unintentional draw with another blue deck. But like, that was the point. Is like I had a margin for error, whereas other people may not have that margin for error.
Right. That's a good point.
So I think you actually get a better sense. I mean, obviously, we want the events to be as big as possible. Like,
of
that's
course.
positive. But I think one of the, I guess you could call it like mathematical positives of being in a larger tournament is that you get a better sense of what you're playing because you're allowed to make mistakes. You're allowed to. The deck's allowed to fail you, type thing. So
that's a very good point that I didn't consider up until you brought it up. But yeah, it is it's a valid thing that you do get a little bit of breathing room in whether it's, as you said, X11 or even X2 if it gets large enough, that sort of thing, depending on how the official cut breaks down.
And then on the flip side, I think that like you have to have a more varied strategy going into a larger event because you're going to be facing things throughout the event that may have gotten to 2-0 when you're 2-0 because they faced, I don't know, something random for the first 2 rounds or just good matchups for the first 2 rounds.
Yeah.
And then like, so you're probably also going to be facing a variety of things that you wouldn't be facing in a smaller, tighter event. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that. So I don't even know. To be honest with you, there could be an argument that the smaller events are actually more difficult because of that less margin for error.
Yeah, there's obviously other factors that are going to contribute to that.
Yeah.
Are you the guy at your store? In which case, maybe you walk into the room and you go, okay, I'm fine with this 7-man tournament or whatever.
Right. Right.
Or is it going to be, no, you're not the guy, but the other 6 people of that 7 tournament are, and then you may be in for a long day or a short day, I guess, depending on how you look at it.
Right.
So yeah, that's definitely something interesting to consider that I hadn't thought of, and it's like I said, I'm still very interested in. Again, I'll put out the call. Anybody who has gone to an event, we are getting some more feedback in general, not us specifically, but just people who've been to qualifiers, what they played, how they did. It seems like there are more people that are willing to put it out there. And I'm very curious to see how people, what do they feel about it? Just the general consensus, even if it's not a tried and true prototypical tournament report sort of thing. Mm-hmm. As for the event that I played in, it was smaller. We did have a number of repeats also. I ended up top 4ing or top 2ing, I guess. We drew in the finals because everybody was, the guy who queued was ready to celebrate. The 2 people who needed the qualification ended up getting paired in the top 4. So Frenchie and I played off on the side. Nobody cared about our game, and the only game people cared about was the one with the actual people looking to get qualified again. So I ended up running Blaster, and to your point, Scott, the decks at this stage I'm just tweaking it. I'm trying out different things. There's still some minor modifications I'd make. when I walked in, Joe made a joke that he was blaming me for the plague of blasters that apparently are showing up everywhere. I didn't realize that it was becoming so ubiquitous, but I'm kind of glad that it is because the deck is really fun to play.
Did you tell him it was my fault, or did you accept the blame?
Well, I figured I tell everybody that really you built the deck, but I took the blame for it in that case. So I still really love this deck, and to be honest, if I get to go to any other qualifiers, and I'm going to try to, I'll probably just play it because I do actually enjoy playing it, not just because it's been performing well, although admittedly that's part of it. I had mentioned earlier that the part of the theme for our event, it seemed, was that there were, again, a lot of people trying different things, but also more than a couple people trying to run various mixed pip decks, obviously featuring primarily General Optimus, who is, I don't know if he's quite usurped the title from Battlefield Legend, but if he hasn't, he's getting close. He seems to be pushing the Old Faithful out, despite the cries of everybody that wanted him banned for a while. General Optimus seems to be making much more waves at this stage.
Yeah, I don't think that's... I think that's I mean, he's in a lot of sideboards.
Who, Battlefield Legend, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
So there's that aspect of it. So, like, that probably means that there's opportunities for him to be in main decks as well. But
of course,
it's just a star cost if people want to try other combinations of cards that go along with it. He fits really well in with a lot of established double sevens that are out there. That's where you're getting like the general Sentinels, whatever you want to call them, lists,
yes,
things like
which
that.
Was a really unique idea that we didn't call out from your event. It was
mirrored at your event, or no, it wasn't actually.
No, it was. Although I did.
Lineup was.
Yeah, the starting lineup was the same, and I did make it a point when I sat down against everybody that laid those characters out. Are you running the transformational board? And they said, yeah, no, not going with it, and with good reason, because we had discussed it at the time, but it was basically they didn't feel the way their build was going that there was ever a point where they wanted to switch into that, which I kind of get, but it's still something to keep in the back of your mind. It was just a unique and interesting concept.
Yeah, I've never played Sentinels. Like I obviously saw its power level during the beginning of Wave 2, at least. So I can't really comment as to like where that fits in against the other 3 white orange decks. Like why you would do one thing or the other. Like I don't really know.
They do feel like they attack. If you're a 3 white orange deck and then you become Sentinels, to me it feels like they attack the same thing and then have bad matchups against the same thing. So short of the shock value, I'm not entirely sure at this stage when you want to become Sentinels.
Well, the one that Top 8 at Comic Book Store was able to combine. So he did
actually. I mean, I saw the Enigma, but I didn't realize that he actually did accomplish it.
Yeah, that was part of like what he became a much more mixed deck, and then like wanted to actually like trigger the Optimus ability to flip one of the other characters to combine faster.
Okay.
Etc. So I mean, I don't know how blue slanted he was actually able to get post board. I don't know. I mean, I watched the deck tech that Stefan had on his channel, but I didn't really study as to how many blues would be left in the deck versus oranges after boarding and stuff like that.
Right.
But so that part of it at least was interesting, is if he was able to pull it off.
Right.
But the only and like again, most of my games were going late, so I wasn't able to pay attention to like other games going on. But like, he lost to a 4 white orange in the top 8, quote, as expected in 2 games. So like that's where I just don't know like how it broke down. Like I would assume he tried to go the combiner route, but like in talking to Eric, who beat him with Blaster, like it didn't matter. So like again, like I don't really. I mean, it's a cool deck. Don't get me wrong. I just don't know again like what axis it really what it really solves compared to other.
Hey, sometimes it's just for the lulz, and that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, it was a good deck. Don't get me wrong. I just from a three wide orange deck perspective, I just don't, unless you're becoming very, very, unless you're able to become blue, which is probably the route I would go post board.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what other axes you're really fighting on, but maybe it does. I just don't know.
I had mentioned in talking to people when I was asking them whether they were featuring that plan, I had said offhand that it's unfortunate that you don't really want to start with Sunstreaker and Hot Rod and something else typically, and then you could try and become, so you go from a 3-wide blue deck to become a sort of 3-wide orange deck, sort of, if there was some way to make that happen. As it is right now, it's just basically what you're saying. If you're already 3-wide orange, you're just becoming a different 3-wide orange that is, you're probably going to have the same matchups, I think. But obviously he did well with it. If he was combining, that's super awesome. I'm kind of sad that I missed that event. I mean, I was anyway, but I'm sad that I missed seeing that in person.
He said he combined a couple times in the day, so I'm sure.
Interesting.
I'm sure it was the plan. So
okay. I mean, I'm sure. I wish I was there, and I'm glad I wasn't. But his first opponent that he did that to, because that had to throw you for a loop when you saw that happen.
Well, because you're flipping the guys in the scrap pile for value anyway, and
right?
All of a sudden, you're like, fine.
Surprise, Enigma! Wait, what?
Yeah. So
that would be hysterical. As long as it's not happening to me, that would probably be very sad for me. But anyway, so yeah, the event at Showcase went very well. There was a variety of different things. A lot of people, again, trying out different stuff, but it is not, just so we don't repeat it all, it's kind of echoing what you were describing, where a lot of people that were already qualified were attempting to either try out new things or just play different decks for the sake of it, or all of the reasons that we talked about. Whereas I stuck with the same thing and I'm tweaking it, because that's my favorite part about it, is just tweaking the existing known stuff. That I come up with a lot of deck ideas, most of them terrible, but it's more fun for me to actually just sit and tinker with something. But that's just me.
The only thing I'll take away is I guess the two events were a week apart.
Yes.
And I guess, like, we don't know the details. I've had many conversations with many different people, both officially and unofficially. Like, again, I would imagine when these seasons roll around again, they will not just be, you have a kid run the event. But it's pretty obvious from this extremely small sample set that, like, having them back to back, and then I can tell you what's happening in a couple weeks from now is having, like, 4 of them within driving distance on the same day.
Yeah. Well, that's on the very last weekend, correct?
No, it's the weekend before.
Oh, it's the weekend before. Okay, then I must have mixed up the dates. I thought they were the last weekend, and I was going to give the excuse, well, it's the last weekend, everybody's trying to get it in. But if that's not the case,
the issue here is, and I understand this, the last weekend of the month is the Magic pre-release. So, like, I get
that could be a problem.
I get it. That stores bread and butter, and it's like a new set of, like, the cycle or the block, however they work now.
Yeah,
and it's like this, like, I don't know, fairy tale or whatever.
Hey, did you watch the trailer for it? Not to get too off topic.
No. But I heard it was cool. But no.
It was. If you haven't seen it, anybody out there listening, just go watch it. Just go watch it.
Cool.
Yeah, it's. I don't want to say anything about it because I think I'll give stuff away. But yeah, just go watch it.
So I think that's the last weekend of the month. So, like, I can understand why there aren't a lot of events going on then. I certainly understand that from a store's perspective. Again, Magic is their bread and butter.
Of course.
But the weekend before, like, especially in our area, like, for some weird reason, like, the one that we helped schedule, the Top Deck Games ones that ran all the case events, like, theirs is the 21st, which we're planning on going to.
Right.
But there's 4 on the 22nd, 4 on a Sunday. Like, it's just weird.
I mean, I guess, like you said, it's air quotes now the last weekend because of the complication of the Magic events. But they're all gonna, at least for they can't not. They are unable to avoid cannibalizing people. I'm trying to find a better way to phrase it.
There's none this weekend. So,
well, I mean, by virtue of what they're doing, if they had chosen a different path, we'll say, then it probably would have worked out for everyone, because obviously people that are still trying to queue, or just people that want to play, go play. You know, like, it's spread out so they have the opportunity. Now it's, well, by definition, you can't be in two places at once, so that kind of sucks.
Yeah, one of the things I've talked to people about is, like, I do believe that this season was and I think both hearing his actual words and reading between the lines with some of what Drew said, is this is a, like, to quote Rick and Morty, show me what you got season. Like, you know, that's like, the stores are showing you what their effort is and what their desire is to run these events. And like, so, you know, next time, I'm not saying it'll be the ProTour Qualifier. And I know that doesn't exist anymore, like the way it used to back in the day.
Yes,
where they get, like, awarded and things like that. But I think it'll be more streamlined with, like, a full schedule probably available when the season starts and things like that, so it's not as haphazard.
That question has come up frequently, so I'm confident there will be a schedule, because there are way too many people asking publicly of, hey, when are all the qualifiers in this geographical area? And everyone just goes, they're happening. Call your stores, sort of thing. I anticipate it'll be, like you said, less haphazard, more organized the next time around.
I mean, a positive is I think a lot of players have come into the game because of this.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But at the same time, like, they don't even know that, like, the regional Facebook groups exist. And, like, to be honest with you, I wouldn't know when most of our events were if I wasn't in every single regional Facebook group within a 3-hour driving distance of them.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you.
You know, even despite, like, because to be honest with you, the people that post their regional events in the main group, I completely ignore, because I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to go to Wisconsin to go play in your Energon Qualifier. Like, why are you even bothering posting this here? Like, you know.
Well, they may need to, only because of exactly what you said. Somebody getting into the game may not realize that typically this information is disseminated at the regional level through those more localized groups. So I guess it doesn't hurt anything for them to post it. There's only potentially something to gain.
I think it's fair.
But yeah, I do hope that there is a more centralized list, and I don't think anybody's necessarily going to think that it would be a negative if there was I don't want to call it constricting or shrinking, but if less stores were able to run qualifiers, that's not necessarily a negative. It's, you could still have every weekend filled up with geographical, you know, your local area, driving distance, whatever, with a variety of different stores. It's just that now, A, the organization that we talked about, and B, if it's not across the country, you can consolidate to get those slightly larger events instead of random 6-person tournament. Now everybody's tournament is 30 plus people, which I find more fun. So I'm hoping everybody else out there enjoys the larger events as well.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about this after the season's over. Hopefully we can get some guests on that would give us their opinions as well. So,
of course, yeah, there's going to be a lot of dissection, I guess, after, and room for analysis once the season's reached its full conclusion.
But I do, in my heart of hearts, believe it's being done the way it's being done, purposefully to gain this. I don't understand where these pockets of play actually occur, and then consolidate from there.
Yep. Well, that'll do it for this week's episode, folks. Please tune in next time, where we finally get to the latter half of the initial agenda, where we're going to discuss all of the various spoilers that we've gotten in recent days. But before we officially sign off, I did want to give a quick shout out to Top Deck Games in New Jersey. They have, since basically the inception of the game, been making every effort to support it. They run a number of fantastic events. It was always a lot of fun. There was always a high level of competition. And they do have one coming up at the time you're hearing this very soon, specifically the 21st of September. It's going to be one of the last Energon Invitational Qualifiers in the area. So if you're looking for that elusive queue, or if you just want to come out and play some high-level Transformers TCG, it's going to be a great time. We always have great turnouts, so I'm certainly hoping that we're going to get another one, and I hope to see you there. So, as always, thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and please tune in next time for for more tech talk.
Hey guys, Dan here from VectorSigma.info. We wanted to take this moment to thank all of our patrons for believing in the service we're providing. If you're not yet a member of a Patreon, feel free to click on the link for other podcasts like this one, or verse videos, or any of the other great content that we provide on our YouTube channel. Thanks, guys.